Every summer, my family and I look forward to our camping trips. It's a special tradition filled with laughter, campfire stories, and the joy of being in nature. There's something magical about the great outdoors, away from the hustle and bustle of everyday life. Last year was just like any other, and we couldn't wait for our annual adventure. On a sunny Friday morning, the sun peeked through the clouds, and the air felt fresh and inviting. We woke up early, buzzing with excitement, ready to embark on our journey. My parents had been planning this trip for weeks, making sure we had everything we needed. The smell of pancakes wafted through the houses as my mom whipped up breakfast, and my dad double-checked our camping gear. As we gathered in the kitchen, I could see my little brother, Jake, practically bouncing in his seat. His eyes sparkled with excitement as he chattered away about what we might do at the campsite. Are we going to roast marshmallows? Can we go fishing? What if we see a bear? He asked, his wide eyes full of curiosity. Slow down there, buddy. We'll have plenty of time for all that. My dad chuckled, ruffling Jake's hair. I smiled, knowing this was going to be another memorable trip. After breakfast, we loaded our gear into the car. My parents made sure we had everything: tents, sleeping bags, cooking supplies, and of course, lots of snacks. I was in charge of bringing the snacks, so I carefully packed our favorites: chips, granola bars, and of course, the all-important marshmallows. With everything loaded, we piled into the car, ready for the adventure ahead. With our hearts full of excitement, we set off down the winding road, leaving the bustling city behind us. The journey was filled with laughter as we sang along to our favorite songs and shared stories from past camping trips. I looked out the window at the changing scenery: tall trees, rolling hills, and the occasional glimpse of wildlife. It felt good to be away from the noise of everyday life. As we drove deeper into the woods, the trees grew taller and closer together, creating a canopy overhead that made it feel like we were entering a different world. The sunlight danced through the leaves, casting playful shadows on the road. My dad turned up the music, and we sang at the top of our lungs, letting the rhythm of the songs carry us into the spirit of adventure. After a couple of hours, we finally arrived at the trailhead where we would begin our hike to the campsite. The excitement was palpable as we piled out of the car, stretching our legs and taking deep breaths of fresh, crisp air. My mom pulled out the map, checking our route while Jake explored the area nearby, picking up sticks and pretending they were fishing poles. It looks like it's about a mile down this trail, my mom said, pointing to the map. Are we ready? Jake and I nodded, eager to start our adventure. Let's go, I exclaimed, grabbing my backpack and slinging it over my shoulder. The trail was surrounded by towering trees and vibrant greenery, making it feel like we were walking into a fairy tale. We set off with a spring in our step, the sounds of nature enveloping us. At first, it was an easy walk, with the sunlight filtering through the leaves above, creating a warm, golden glow around us. We chatted and laughed, excited about the fun ahead. But soon, the path began to steepen. I found myself breathing a little harder as we climbed. The dirt trail twisted and turned, and my legs began to feel the strain. Whoa, this is a bit tougher than I thought, I admitted, glancing back at Jake, who was lagging behind, his little legs working hard to keep up. Come on, Jake, you can do it, I called, encouraging him to keep up. He flashed me a determined smile and pushed forward, even though his little face was flushed with effort. As we hiked, the trail turned muddy and overgrown in some areas, making it harder to navigate. We had to step carefully to avoid slipping. As we pressed on, the sounds of chirping birds and rustling leaves surrounded us, creating a beautiful backdrop for our adventure. I took a moment to appreciate the beauty around us. The air was fresh, and the earthy smell of the forest filled my lungs. But as we continued, I started to feel a nagging worry creeping in. "Do you think we're going the right way?" I asked my dad as we reached a particularly steep section of the trail. He stopped to check the map again, furrowing his brow in concentration. "I think so. Just a little farther, and we should see the campsite," he said, his voice steady. Jake and I exchanged glances, trying to hide our doubts. With a shared sense of determination, we pressed on. The trail narrowed, and we squeezed past overhanging branches and roots that stuck up from the ground like little obstacles trying to trip us up. Each step felt like a small victory. Finally, after what felt like ages, we pushed through the thick underbrush and emerged into a small clearing. The sight before us was breathtaking. Trees surrounded us like guardians, creating a natural enclosure, and a patch of overgrown grass provided the perfect spot to set up our camp. "Wow, this place is amazing," Jake exclaimed, running around and taking in the scenery. He spun in circles, his laughter echoing through the trees. We quickly got to work, pitching our tent and unpacking our supplies. I took charge of arranging our sleeping bags inside the tent, while my mom organized the cooking supplies. My dad set about gathering more firewood for our campfire later. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting golden rays through the trees, we realized it was time to start dinner. My mom began preparing the food, slicing vegetables and grilling hot dogs over the small fire pit. Meanwhile, my dad and I continued to gather firewood, and Jake wandered around, exploring the nearby bushes and pretending to be an intrepid explorer. Once we had a nice pile of wood, we built a small fire pit and lit the fire. The warmth from the flames was comforting, and soon the smell of cooking filled the air. We sat around the fire, sharing stories and roasting hot dogs, feeling content in our little slice of nature. As we enjoyed our dinner, the sun began to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. It was one of those moments that felt like a scene from a movie. Everything was perfect, and the world seemed to slow down. We took a moment to appreciate the beauty around us, the sounds of nature soothing our minds. The crackling of the fire and the distant call of a bird created a peaceful symphony. Just as we finished eating, Jake's eyes widened with excitement. "Can we roast marshmallows now?" he asked, bouncing in his seat. "Of course," my dad replied, grinning. "That's the best part of camping." We took out the marshmallows and sticks, ready for some sweet treats. I carefully skewered a marshmallow on a long stick and held it over the fire, watching as it began to turn golden brown. "Just the right amount of toasting," I said, carefully turning it to get an even roast. Jake, eager to get his marshmallow just right, was a few steps ahead, giggling with delight. "Look, Mom, mine is on fire," he exclaimed, holding up a slightly charred marshmallow that was probably more black than brown. We all laughed as my mom helped him salvage it, and we enjoyed our gooey treats, savoring the sweetness as the sun disappeared behind the trees, leaving a sky filled with stars. The night air grew cooler, and I snuggled into my sweatshirt, feeling cozy around the fire. As we settled back in our camping chairs, my dad began to share stories from his childhood. He told us about the time he went camping with his friends and accidentally set his sleeping bag on fire while roasting marshmallows. Jake and I were in stitches, imagining our dad as a kid, trying to escape the flames. Just then, a loud voice echoed from behind us. "Did you hear that?" I whispered, my heart racing. It wasn't my imagination. I felt a strange chill creep down my spine. My dad nodded, and we both turned to look, but there was no one there. It felt strange and unsettling. The voice sounded close, but the trees hid everything from view. My mom glanced over, concern flickering in her eyes. What was that? Jake asked, looking nervous. He clutched his marshmallow stick like it was a sword. I don't know, my dad replied, frowning. Let's keep an eye out. We exchanged worried glances, not saying anything more, and began scanning the area for any signs of movement. The woods felt different. Now, something about the atmosphere had changed. The chirping crickets had quieted down, and the night felt heavier, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. Suddenly, we heard the noise again, a deep voice calling out from the shadows. It sent a chill down my spine. I looked at my dad, and he seemed just as uneasy, his brow furrowed in thought. Let's head back to the campsite, he suggested, his voice calm but firm. We hurried back, the crackling fire providing a sense of safety. As we settled in, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The same noise echoed once more, and I felt a knot of fear tightening in my stomach. Dad, what if something is out there? I whispered, glancing around nervously. My heart raced as I thought about all the creatures that could be lurking in the woods. I'm not sure, he said, trying to sound reassuring. Just stay by the fire. I'll check things out. I didn't like the idea of him leaving, but I trusted my dad. He walked toward the direction of the noise, and I watched him disappear into the darkness. My heart raced as I sat by the fire, the flickering flames casting eerie shadows on the trees. Minutes felt like hours as I waited, my mind racing with scary thoughts. What if something happened to him? What if he didn't come back? After about 15 minutes, my anxiety grew to the point where I couldn't stay still. I stood up, peering into the darkness where my dad had gone. I took a few steps away from the campsite, trying to see or hear anything. Dad? I called softly, but only silence answered me. My heart thudded in my chest. Suddenly, I heard footsteps up ahead. My heart skipped a beat. Dad? I called again, my voice shaking. It was so dark that I couldn't see anything, but the sound of footsteps grew louder. Panic surged through me, and I felt frozen. Suddenly, I heard a voice, a whisper to my left and another to my right, calling my name. My dad rushed toward me, panic on his face. Get back to the fire, he yelled urgently. I could see fear in his eyes, and I turned and ran back to the campsite, my heart pounding. My dad was right behind me, and we quickly packed up what we could. I could see his distress, and it frightened me. What's wrong? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. We need to go. Now, he replied, his voice tense and serious. We hastily left our tents and supplies behind, the thought of whatever was out there pushing us to move faster. My heart raced as we ran, the woods feeling alive, shadows moving all around us, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being chased. We ran for what felt like forever, my legs burning and lungs gasping for air. After what felt like several hundred feet, my dad slowed to a fast walk, trying to catch his breath. What did you see? I asked, desperate to know what scared him so much. He shook his head. Just keep moving, he urged, his voice low. The path back to the truck felt endless, twisting and turning in the darkness. My mind raced with thoughts of what could be hiding in the shadows behind us. The woods were thick, and the sounds of the night echoed around us, making me jump at every rustle or snap of a twig. Finally, we reached the truck. My dad quickly unlocked the doors and helped Jake and me climb in. He started the engine, and we sped down the dirt road, leaving the campsite behind us. As we drove home, the silence in the car was heavy. I kept glancing at my dad, trying to read his thoughts. The tension was thick, and I knew he was worried. Jake was quiet too, still holding onto the remnants of his marshmallow stick, his eyes wide and scared. Dad, what happened back there? I finally asked, breaking the silence that hung in the air. He took a deep breath, gripping the steering wheel tightly. "I don't know, but I heard something moving in the bushes," he said slowly. "It sounded big, and I didn't want to stick around to find out what it was." I shivered at his words, recalling the sounds we heard. "What if it was an animal?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Maybe," he replied, but I could tell he wasn't sure. "We just can't take any chances." The moon hung high in the sky, casting eerie shadows on the road as we drove. I couldn't stop replaying the night's events in my mind, sending chills down my spine. My imagination ran wild with thoughts of creatures lurking in the dark. When we finally got home, I felt a mix of relief and lingering fear. I wanted to forget the experience, but the memory of those footsteps haunted me. Even though we were safe in our own home, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that clung to me. That night, as I lay in bed, I replayed the events of the evening over and over in my mind. Every little sound made me jump. Every shadow felt like a reminder of the fear I had felt in the woods. I pulled the covers up to my chin, trying to block out the memories that haunted me. "Dad," I finally whispered, my voice trembling. "Do you think we'll ever go back to that campsite?" "I hope so," he replied softly from the other room, though I could sense his uncertainty. "But we'll choose a different spot next time, one that feels safer." His words brought me a small sense of comfort, but the fear lingered. That night, I learned that camping could be both magical and frightening. The woods were beautiful and serene during the day, but at night, they held secrets that were best left undiscovered. As the days passed, I tried to shake off the fear. I focused on the good memories from our trip, the laughter around the campfire, the taste of roasted marshmallows, and the bond we shared as a family. But every time I heard a rustle outside or the wind howled through the trees, I would remember that night. Eventually, I realized that our camping trip taught me something important, that adventures can sometimes be scary, but they also bring us together and create unforgettable memories. I felt grateful for my family, for the safety of our home, and for the love that kept us strong. A few weeks later, as the summer days began to fade into autumn, my family sat around the dinner table, reminiscing about our camping trip. My parents laughed about the mishaps we had encountered, and Jake shared his favorite memory, roasting marshmallows and watching the sunset. I joined in, adding my own stories about our hike and the excitement we felt as we set up camp. But when the conversation shifted to that night, a hush fell over the table. My parents exchanged glances, and I could see the memories reflected in their eyes. "I think we should plan another camping trip," my dad said finally, breaking the silence. "But this time, we'll stick to places we know and trust." "Yeah," Jake exclaimed, his eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "And I promise not to burn my marshmallows next time." We all laughed, and I felt a warmth spread through me. The fear I had felt seemed to fade as we talked about future adventures. I knew that no matter what happened, we would face it together as a family. As summer turned to fall, the world outside changed. The leaves turned brilliant shades of orange and red, and the air grew crisp. I looked forward to our next camping trip, ready for new adventures and stories to tell. I learned that while some experiences might be frightening, they also remind us of the love and support we have in our lives. That autumn, we planned a trip to a different campsite, one my parents had visited years before. It was known for its beautiful views and friendly wildlife. The thought of new adventures filled me with excitement, and I felt ready to embrace the unknown. With my family by my side, I knew I could face anything. As we drove to our new campsite, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The sun shone brightly, and the trees were a vibrant tapestry of colors. My heart swelled with anticipation as I gazed out the window, soaking in the beauty of nature. We arrived at the campsite and set up our tents, laughing and working together as a team. The air was filled with the familiar sense of pine and earth, grounding me in the present moment. As we explored the area, I felt the thrill of adventure bubbling up inside me. That night, we gathered around the fire once more, roasting marshmallows and sharing stories. The stars sparkled above us like diamonds, and I felt a sense of connection to the universe. This time, I felt different. I was ready to embrace the beauty of camping without the weight of fear holding me back. As the fire crackled, I shared my thoughts about our last camping trip. You know, even though that night was scary, it taught me something important, I said, looking at my family. What did it teach you? My mom asked, her eyes warm and curious. It taught me that even when things get scary, we're stronger together. I'm grateful for you all, and I know we can face anything as a family, I replied, my heart full of love. My dad smiled, and Jake nodded enthusiastically. Yeah, we're like a superhero team, he exclaimed, puffing out his chest. We all laughed, and the tension that had lingered from our last trip faded away. That night, I learned that even in the face of fear, love and family could light the way. As we lay in our tents, the sound of crickets and rustling leaves cradled us to sleep. I closed my eyes, feeling grateful for the adventures we shared and the memories we created. And when I dreamed, it was not of fear, but of joy and the magic of the great outdoors. After our adventure, camping became a topic of conversation among friends and family. I often found myself sharing our experience, and each time, I could see the mixture of excitement and fear in their eyes. People would ask what we saw or what we heard, and I would tell them everything I knew. But my dad never spoke of it again. That summer camping trip taught me the importance of being prepared and aware of my surroundings. It reminded me that nature, while beautiful, can also be unpredictable and sometimes dangerous. As the days turned into weeks, I began to reflect on our experience. I felt grateful for my dad's quick thinking and bravery, knowing that if he hadn't come back when he did, things could have ended very differently. Even though I was scared, I realized that these moments, these adventures, were what made our family bond stronger. The stories we shared, even the scary ones, brought us closer together. With each passing year, we continued our camping tradition, but the memory of that night remained etched in my mind. It served as a reminder to respect nature and to always be cautious, no matter how exciting the adventure might be. Camping became more than just a summer activity for us. It became a way to connect with each other and the world around us. Each trip was filled with new memories, laughter, and sometimes even a little fear, but it was always worth it. In the end, our scary encounter became a story we shared with friends, a tale of bravery and the bond between a father and child. It reminded us that, even in the face of fear, we could always rely on each other. And every summer, as we loaded up the car and set off for our camping adventures, we knew that whatever challenges we faced, we would face them together.